Welcome back to the Miraculous Mamas podcast. I'm your host, Elizabeth Joy Presta. I am a certified labor doula and a prenatal coach, and we believe in empowering women through storytelling and education. Last week, we had on Dr. Tracy Tran, and we talked all about tongue and lip ties. Tons of information in there, and it's pretty crazy because when you think about it, it's something that you hear more and more about. So it's like, is this just something that's starting to happen more, or is there just more awareness around it? And we dig into that and even go way back to when there were tongue and lip ties back in the day and what midwives used to do. And just, yeah, it was a great informative podcast. And then she made me interested in like so many other topics. So I want to get on somebody from the Sleep Institute to talk about that. And just even baby sleep and posture and all these different things that are affected that can cause different symptoms in your life that can be linked to even ADHD or behavioral issues, eating issues, speech, and linguistics. So many things can be linked to ties or just even other underlying conditions. So it was a super interesting podcast. If you didn't listen, make sure you go back and do that. This week, I'm so excited. We have Ayanna Davison on, and she is a midwife in the LA area. I've been following her for a long time on Instagram. She's known as the Vagina Chronicles, and I love the conversation that we have today. It's one that I've been wanting to have for a long time. She and I actually touched base a year ago about this podcast, and just pandemic craziness it happened, and so we weren't able to record it until recently. And we dive into the birthing crisis in America, and more specifically in the Black community, and how that needs to change. She brings a lot of historical information and just even things now that need to happen in order for birthing people to feel safe, to be not only feel safe, but to actually be safe when they are birthing. You have rights in labor and delivery, and every single person deserves a birth where they are respected, where they are informed, where they are in control of their birth, where they feel safe and validated and heard. So I love the work that she's doing. Her passion to start her own birth center is amazing. I cannot wait to see where she goes. And it's just such a powerful episode hearing the numbers. It's pretty crazy because when you think about it, like, I guess for me, I'm always like, okay, we live in the United States of America. So we have top healthcare when it comes to anything, except for so many things with women's health and women's rights in healthcare. Women are continuously dismissed, not heard, and ignored. And that carries over into the birthing community. And for being, quote unquote, one of the greatest nations who has all these amazing tools at our disposal, we are really failing mothers. We're failing birthing people, and that has to change. So this episode, we dive into some of that, and I just love the conversation with her. I love following her on Instagram, so make sure you guys go follow her, and we're going to go ahead and dive right into it. All right, everyone, I have Ayanna Davison here, and she is known as the Vagina Chronicles on Instagram, and I've been following her for a while, and I've loved following her. First of all, like, your energy is just so amazing on there. I was just watching it before we hopped on this, and you were talking about World Doula Week, and just you have so much information and knowledge on there, and that's why I'm so grateful for that birthing realm in the virtual world these days, because you can just kind of learn from each other. And she's a midwife in California, and she's here just to talk to us about her practice and her experience and what led her to where she is now, and just birthing today and what it's like. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. So happy to be here.
I'm so happy too. And she did just work a really long shift, guys. So I'm really thankful for her time and her energy today. So can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you become a midwife?
Sure. As you said, I am a practicing midwife. I'm a certified nurse midwife. I practice in sunny Southern California most of the time anyway. And a former East Coaster, very much into science as a child growing up. Loved biology, fell in love with the heart, and it was a wrap from there. And then once I saw a birth, which was like in a class or at like some science museum, I was like, oh, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen, which for children might be strange. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I was hooked from that time, and originally wanted to become a doctor, went down that path, and the doors were not opening. And it was like, this is not for me. My grandmother, I always knew her to be a nurse, and so a registered nurse. And so I'd never thought about it. Her sisters, we have a long line of nurses and people in education too. And so, I was like, okay, well, one day it just kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. Or I like to say, in the TV shows, they have that like radiating light down, and you hear, oh, like, that was it for me one day. And so I had my detour of going down that pre-med path, and I took the path that was for me and went back to school to become a registered nurse. And I knew I wanted to be an OBGYN if I was going to be a doctor. That was like what I wanted to do. And so I was like, how can I still help people in the birthing realm as a nurse? So, obviously labor and delivery as a nurse in the hospital, but then I found out more about midwifery in that pathway, and it just kind of like blossomed from there. And so I'm not going to say the road has been easy, but it definitely feels like a called path for me. And so, I just, here I am. And in my process of this, or this journey, like I said, I knew my grandmother to be a registered nurse. In her passing, which was before I went into midwifery school, I discovered that she had been a certified nurse midwife as well in the island of Antigua. So we didn't get a chance to chat about that before she passed away, which is sad, but I'm trying to like dig up a little bit more history, learn a little bit more. I have a few of her tokens. And so it's just like, to kind of feel her like, like a little bit of her presence with me along the journey is nice. So, and here I am now, several years into practice. I love what I do. I currently work at a busy hospital practice. That's not where I plan to be for the rest of my midwifery career. I definitely would love to open up a birth center. That's been the passion and the calling that I had even before nursing school too. I have the receipts for that. I drew it out before I even knew what a birth center was. And so that's kind of in the works now and for the future. So here I am.
Yeah, that's so amazing that you're kind of carrying on your grandma's legacy and like some of what she did, and you weren't even aware of it. It's like it just runs through your veins.
Yeah, it's true. My mom, when she had me, when she went into labor and birth, my grandmother came after, and she pretty much like had me the whole 2 weeks that she was there. She wouldn't let my mom touch me aside from like breastfeeding and like maybe a little cuddling. And my mom just truly believes that my grandmother probably whispered something to me. I'm sure we had some good conversations as I was a baby. So I definitely am proud to carry on her legacy and that of Black midwives, that go before me. So
That's so amazing. So I think a lot of people probably wonder too, like midwives working at hospitals, how does that really work? And are you under, like, is there a different protocol that you'd have to follow there versus if you had a birth center?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, midwife is an umbrella term. There's several different types. We have traditional midwives, there's licensed midwives, certified professional midwives, certified nurse midwives. Certified nurse midwives tend to practice in more hospital settings. They can practice outside, but because of our background in registered nursing and credentialing through the state, for the most part, most states, the CNMs can practice in hospital. Other midwives don't necessarily always have that opportunity, but it depends on the state. What it looks like depends on the practice it depends on your demographic and population. I would lean towards, we tend to be a little bit more medicalized, which is the creepy crawly feeling that I have these days. And so, and not all birth needs to be that way. Not most birth needs to be that way. And so, you can expect, kind of going on the clock when you go in. But I try to be, and I think our group, we try to be as flexible as possible, recognizing that birth indeed is physiological, and letting people do what they're going to do. So in terms of what we can do in the hospital system, not only do we attend births, we do prenatal care. We offer prenatal care through the course of a pregnancy. Some hospitals were allowed to do dating ultrasounds, care, co-management and care of twin pregnancies, co-management of some high-risk pregnancies with a physician, and then, of course, postpartum follow-up, and then pap smears. We offer support through miscarriage loss, abortion, contraception, all kinds of things. So, really depending on the practice, depends on how full of a scope, we can practice through. So, there's a lot to be done, and there's a big need for providers. So for us as midwives.
Mm-hmm. Finances can be a very touchy subject, and when you have earned your money, you deserve to keep it. And so I want to tell you about Chime. It is an award-winning app and debit card with no hidden fees or monthly minimums. They have fee-free overdraft on up to $100 in debit purchases with SpotMe. It's like overdraft protection, but way better. You get your paychecks, benefits, stimulus checks, and tax return up to 2 days earlier with direct deposit. No hidden fees or monthly minimums, plus 38,000 fee-free ATMs with MoneyPass and Visa plus Alliance. Security is a big thing with finances, and you can turn on alerts to let you know when your card is used and instantly block your card if something seems off. You can save on autopilot, which is my favorite feature, just putting that money away. When you sign up for a Chime spending account, you can enroll in an optional savings account and grow your savings automatically with 0.50% annual percentage yield, which is 10 times the national average. So right now, join the millions on Chime. Sign up takes 2 minutes and doesn't affect your credit score. Apply now at chime.com/mamas. That's chime.com/mamas. Chime is a financial technology company. Banking services provided by the Bancorp Bank or Stride Bank N.A. members FDIC. Eligibility requirements and overdraft limits apply. Overdraft only applies to debit card purchases. Limits start at $20 and may be increased up to $100 by Chime. Early direct deposit depends on the payer. Out-of-network cash withdrawal fees apply. Third-party and cash deposit fees may apply. Go to chime.com/mamas for details. I was researching in February and was reading about how in Alabama, when they outlawed midwifery, and just kind of like the effects that had in the community, because I can't remember her first, I think it's Margaret Charles Smith. Mm-hmm. She delivered over 3,000 babies as a midwife and didn't lose any of the moms.
Right.
And then they changed the laws.
Yep.
And that had a detrimental impact on communities because of the way that the systems are set up. But midwife, one of the midwives that I worked with, she said it really well. She was like, midwifery should be the entry care level, and then kind of going, if they're high risk or other needs, going to the obstetrician's level. And I'm like, man, that's so true. And I'm just wondering, like, why is that? Like, you just kind of want to shake people and be like, why is this happening? Like, why are women dying at a higher rate now than when my mom gave birth? And why are all these different things? Like, as a doula, I've been at births where the staff was horrible, but then I've also been at the majority of births I've been to, the staff has been great. Mm-hmm. But I was at one where they laughed at her birth plan and she was in the room, and it was so horrible. It was the most emotional birth I'd ever been to, but it's so sad. And it's like, why? I don't get it.
Mm-hmm. We there's a saying that I'm not sure who said it, but they say every person deserves a midwife. Some people need the help of a physician. So, not everybody's going to need a doctor. And to be fair, their training is for higher level of care, or high risk complications. But what we offer is low risk care and the basics, like you said, And so I really value my time with people, even if they don't really know what I am or what it means to be a midwife. But for sure, we definitely do need more midwifery care nationwide. The data speaks for itself. I think there's something just released this week saying that what we know, which is midwives can help to reduce the cesarean rate nationwide. And of course, doula work does the same too. We kind of work hand in hand with each other. But going back into the historical framework, and it's funny you mentioned Alabama. I'm going to get back to that in a second. But basically, what happened was we were doing well, especially within the Black community. We weren't allowed to go to certain places for care. So that means, the healers of the community had to step out. And that's what midwives, that's what we are. We're, healers of the community. And so we had to step out and do what we needed to do to make sure that people are surviving and making it through birth. But not just that, other ailments, and using some of our ancestral remedies to kind of help out. And people stepped in because medicine is a moneymaker. And it's like, well, you're not sanitizing the way that you need to. And this is incorrect. So we need you guys to go to this training. And then it was like, and then it was kind of like the eradication of Black midwifery within the South. And that is harmful to communities, especially to our community, but in general, where we could offer this help. And to be fair too, the Black midwives sometimes were attending, white births as well to help out. And they're also being wet nurses, that kind of thing. So we really did a whole lot. And then it was just like this kind of like a washout. But I would love for people to know is like Black midwifery is definitely alive and well. We are small but strong and trying to grow. And I think to clarify, we're not trying to take anyone's job away. Like the need for care is like real and really high. Like the access levels it's kind of astonishing. And so it's important to know that, we're just here to help. Like we want to help people get through their experiences and get the care that they need. Going back to Alabama, I know another midwife who, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Stephanie Mitchell. She's actually now trying to open the first birth center in Alabama because right now they have like none of that because of legislation. And so she has this really big pull for what's called the birth sanctuary. She's live on her pages trying to make it happen. So people are here trying to do the work, and make sure that communities have what they need and what they deserve. So another thing you said too, I think that midwives play a really huge role in is if we're careful enough and we're mindful enough, we can take what was ancestral, like the herbal, the more holistic side of things, combined with a little bit of technology, like that can actually make for a really great experience. We don't have to be, we're taught to use our hands and our gut, and that's super important, but we don't have to rely solely on one thing or the other. The combination of the two, I think, is really a place where we can all thrive. And so if we take a look more at that, I think in health if we look at health on a whole, on a whole basis, if we took both the holistic side and a little bit of the technology that we have, knowing that we're progressing forward, combination of the two, we might get better outcomes. So, you did ask too, what's going on?
So much to unpack.
Right. people are dying. People of color are dying at higher rates, but the Black maternal health crisis is a huge deal. But even more so, women in general, or people who are birthing in general, are still dying at a high rate for such a developed country. And it goes back to our systems. You brought up the example of the patient who, like, people laughed at her birth plan. There's a lot of that. You would be surprised. Yeah. And people can go in and have exceptional experiences in the hospital. But again, it's very territorial. It's a very caustic environment for people of color. It was not designed for us. So these spaces are not spaces where I necessarily expect for folks to thrive. But that's why many of us are there, or we try to get in there. And that's trying to make a different path for folks. And if we can't do that, then we'll do some work on the outside to make a way for people to get what they need. But, if you look at the data, it's like, well, is it hemorrhage? Is it preeclampsia? I think what it boils down to is listening to someone. Listening to Black women is key. Listening to women in general is key. And what happens is people, a lot of providers and staff, again, the territorial part and I know what's happening and I went to school for this, but you have someone in front of you who knows their body, who may know this is off, and it may not seem like a big deal to you, but it's a huge deal to me because I know my body well enough to know these things. Or even just a simple complaint like, I'm having pain and it just won't go away. It's really important to take time to listen to those things. Remembering that who's in front of you is a human person who requires dignity. That's so important. So there's a number of things that have contributed to this crisis. And there are a number of things in the works trying to help correct the process as well. Again, the work of midwifery or midwives and the work of doulas, I think, is vital to helping to see change. I don't know that the system itself, in terms of the hospital, will improve on its own. I think it needs a whole smashing in. Right.
Clean house.
Yes. Yeah. And let's rebuild, Mm-hmm. But until that time, if we can kind of move pieces out, kind of break that foundation down that's causing so much heartache, pain, so much destruction. I think if we can get to those pieces one by one, we can make a difference. We can.
Yeah. We're going to take a quick break from this episode to talk about one of my favorite wellness brands, and that is Care of. All of Care of's products are formulated with good-for-you, clean ingredients that are backed by science, and they make everything so convenient to get in your vitamins and supplements. And what I did, because sometimes I just start taking random vitamins. I know that doesn't sound great, but I do. It's like I buy this vitamin over there, then this supplement over there, and then I'm like, what do I really need to be taking? And so they make it quick and easy to go online, and you can take their quiz, and it's an in-depth 5-minute online quiz that asks you questions about your diet, lifestyle, your health concerns to help address your specific wellness goals. And it's like getting a one-on-one consultation with a nutritionist, all without leaving your house. You get a personally tailored approach to your unique health needs. And as moms, partners, and business owners, women have a lot on their plate. Small routines like drinking a glass of water, taking your vitamins, or adding collagen to your morning coffee can go a long way in helping you prioritize your health and your self-care. And Care of helps support you with the ongoing guidance and nutrients tailored to your specific needs. Like I said, I like it because, first of all, it's all in a pack. So I'm not unscrewing random tops from different bottles to try to get this vitamin here and that one there. And I was able to go online and feel confident that I'm taking things that my body needs and that I'm just getting that additional nutritional support that I need in my life. So right now we have a great offer for you guys for 50% off your first Care of order. Go to takecareof.com and enter code miraculous takecareof50. That's takecareof.com and enter code miraculous50 for 50% off your first Care of order. Now, back to the episode. I always tell people to try to like research the providers and see like what's available in your area. But the problem with that too is then like what insurance covers. So if your insurance doesn't cover a midwife, if your insurance doesn't cover the type of care that you want, that's a huge problem that has to change.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I don't think here's another, there's so many components to this, right? So, so it's one thing to want midwifery care. It's another thing to plan and save for it. So, and for birth in general, I don't think people realize the cost of birth in America. And that's again, a whole other thing. But like, you know, if you're talking out of hospital birth, again, Southern California, we can say maybe an average of $7,000, you know, for an out of hospital experience. That's not including your doula care, maybe chiropractic care, which is necessary. There's so many components to being pregnant. And, you know, many times it's like, oh, hey, surprise, here we are. And that's cool. And then there's some people who plan for it, but even in the planning, if we're investing in ourselves and our futures, I think, you know, it's cool to invest for a wedding. It's cool to invest for a house, but let's invest for birth too. Because if that's your plan to be a parent, it's going to cost you some money. And I'm not just talking diaper money. This is more that goes beyond that. So, you know, you're thinking about that. And then what does my insurance cover? Will it cover any portion of this? You want to find that out sooner rather than later, so that you can prepare for it. But, and here's where I think a lot of Black midwives struggle too, is that like, I can speak for a good majority of folks, and I know they love what they do, you know, for my community. I know they love what they do, and impacting the community means so much to them that sometimes getting the money is like the last priority, which leaves us in a bind. You're getting this great quality care, and you wouldn't do this with anybody else. So you need to pay your midwife, you know, for the job that they're doing. They go above and beyond. I mean, not every case is perfect. You know, this is definitely a generalized statement, but you work with a midwifery group, so you know like what type of care people get, and it's, you know, it's still a job. It's not just ooh, have this baby and I'm going to be here. It's the breastfeeding. It's the anxiety, depression before you even have the baby. It's my body is changing. What's right? What's not right? Can I call you in the middle of the night? You know. You know, there's so many different pieces to it, but if I can say anything to people, anyone who's listening and has not had a baby or is planning one for the future or is going to plan another one in the future, it's like financially prepare too, you know, because that's an important component, you know, look at what's out there.
I loved earlier how you mentioned, kind of like the number one reason why women are dying is being listened to. And I interview a lot of people on here, and something that I've heard so many times, and even just stories from like my mom and different people, is providers not listening. And it's so infuriating when you're telling them something and there's no validation there. And so you already don't feel like you matter. And they're the provider, so they must know, but you live in your body all the time. Like even my mom, when she was pregnant with my sister, they were like wheeling her down the hallway, and she's like, I have to push the baby out right now. And they're like, no, you're fine. You don't have to push. And she's like, I have to push the baby out right now. And they like ignored her. Then finally they looked, and my sister's head is like coming out. And it's like, it's not that hard to just look, to be like, okay, let me check. Like, what's the harm in that? There's nothing. It's only benefit in that. There's the harm in not responding to that, you know? And even like in other care, I interviewed a lady who, she was getting a biopsy, a cervical biopsy. Those suck, by the way. And she was telling the lady that it hurt, like whatever she was doing. She's like, oh, that hurts really bad. And she goes, no, it doesn't. She's like, you're not in pain. it doesn't hurt. And she's like, no, this hurts. And she just was like, no, like telling her that it didn't hurt when she's saying that it hurts. And it's like, what the heck? Like, just listen. That's like, I feel like if you tell your nurse something or you tell your provider something and they don't listen to you, request somebody else, because it's like you need somebody who's going to be like, let me check on that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely, that's something I try to drive home often, like through the messages that I'm sending out to people. Like, you're not going to keep going back to a mechanic who like makes your car worse or doesn't fix the problem that's going on with your car. So why would you continuously go to a provider who's like ignoring you or telling you that you're fine? You know, again, it's coming down to, it's humbling yourself. Like, this is another human in front of me. I need to, it's not only listen and believe. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, I believe what you say. You're telling me your pain. Simple procedures, again, the cringeworthy things of the hospital, like people just pushing other folks' legs apart. That's like, it's so frustrating to see. And it's like, no, like, let this person move at their own pace. When you are ready, I can see you're in the middle of a contraction. I'm going to stop talking because you need to go through this, and then we can talk when you are back from that, right? But you know, not everybody, and medicine as this culture is, it can be really, like I said, caustic, and they're taught, I feel like they're taught to be in charge of someone else's body, and that's not really what it's about. You know, it's a puzzle, and you can do a puzzle with someone else, right? Mm-hmm. You can complete a puzzle with someone else. Like, let's put the pieces together. Here's what you're telling me. Here's a little bit of what I know. Let's bring them together so that we can look at the big picture and figure out what's going on with you. Pain is a huge thing. Again, especially in like BIPOC community, people, they are not listened to at all. Like, you know, Black women, it's been studied and shown, like medical students don't believe that Black people, especially Black women, have pain when they say that they do. And it's just ridiculous. Oh no, you're exaggerating. Oh, you're drug seeking. And the reality is, you know, people, you know, when it comes to birth, sometimes they're miscarrying and that's missed. Or we see that too still. Like the story of your mom is still something that happens today. You know, and it's like, oh, I have to push, and you know, okay, no, we just checked you a little while ago. No, but I really have to push. And then it's like, you know, fast rush to get everything together because the baby is literally coming because she told you it was coming, you know? Mm-hmm. And I mean, I understand where I work. I understand that, and what that means. And sometimes I have to check myself too. Like, that's the honest truth. I have to check myself too, which again is another reason, another push for me not to be there anymore, because it goes against, you know, my own personal values and wanting to help folks too. But at the end of the day too, I recognize like not everyone has the luxury of having care outside of the hospital, right? And so that means that we need people like myself, like others, who are going to be inside the system to help them along the way and make their experiences the ones that they deserve and need, you know? So yeah, the listening is huge. And you add in complications, and that is a whole hot mess. If there's a complication and someone's not being listened to, I mean, we've seen the stories in the news. Everyone's heard about Serena. Even Beyonce had some issues, like, you know, and you have to literally go to the desk and beg, you know, for help. So it's embarrassing for our country. It's disgusting. Mm-hmm. And it's something that needs to change. And I think many of us are aware and bothered enough to make a little noise, or like I like to say, flip a table. Like, that's, we're there, you know? One of my friends says, make a scene, mm-hmm. You know? Mm-hmm. You know, if you're not, if you've been, and here's the tricky part too. And I speak a lot from the Black perspective because that's what I am passionate about, and what I most relate to. what happens is, wow, the thought just left my head. Blame the sleep. Oh, here we go. So, imagine, you're going in and you're soft spoken and you say, well, this is what's happening. No one's listening to you. You go in again. This is getting worse. Something's happening. I'm, just being myself, trying to communicate. You're getting pushed off, ignored. At what point do you continue? How long do you continue with soft-spoken manner? And so, then there becomes this stigma that there's like this angry Black woman yelling in the waiting room or yelling in an office. Well, how did we get here? We might have gotten here because she's been saying this story for, 5 appointments with even with 2 different providers. If you have to tell your story over and over, it's frustrating because it's like, at what point is my story being documented in the chart? At what point is someone actually listening to me, And so it's not always like she's just angry. No, like she's trying to save herself. And like I said, you have to sometimes go to the desk and say, hey, like, this is going on and I need some help. And even in our cries like that, we're still ignored because, oh, well, I can't take that or, she has an attitude. And it's not about that. There's something more. There's something deeper, It's time we listen to people. It's really time we listen to people.
Mm-hmm. We're going to take a quick break from this episode so I can talk to you about BetterHelp. BetterHelp has been a part of my mental health journey and my postpartum recovery as well. It doesn't always have to be physical. There's so much mental that goes into motherhood, into this transition in your lives. And there's no shame in having a counselor to talk through these things with and going to therapy. It can be so healing. I've found motherhood to be a very healing time in my life, kind of reflecting on the things that I need to work on and change. And so it's been really great using BetterHelp to be able to have that confidential resource that I can work through these things with. And it's not just for postpartum and motherhood. I mean, any area of your life that you're going through and you need a little help, whether you're depressed or have anxiety, dealing with family issues, relationship issues, sleeping trauma, you can find so many different professionals in these different areas to work with. They're always confidential. It's convenient. It's professional. It's affordable. And you don't have to wait in some awkward office waiting to see your therapist. And in fact, so many people have been using BetterHelp that they are recruiting additional counselors in all 50 states. So start living a happier life today. And as a listener, you'll get 10% off your first month by visiting betterhelp.com/mamas. Join over 1 million people taking charge of their mental health. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/mamas. Do you see, I guess, in the United States with the Black birthing community, are the numbers higher in certain areas for death than others?
Yes, absolutely. So New York, at one point in time, so nationally, Black birthers are 3 to 4 times more likely to die during childbirth and in the postpartum period than white counterparts. New York had higher numbers. Georgia had higher numbers. I want to say New York at one point was like 12 times as high. Yeah. And this is out, we don't even have to consider, or considering their level of education, that makes no difference. Like you could be, we have Black doctors. Last year, there were a few who passed away in their birthing experiences too. So this is not, it's not like an education thing. It's not, finances plays a role because of structural racism, but like, it's not a financial thing. This is like across the board. Everyone is in the same pool. It doesn't matter where you went to school. It doesn't matter if you're a doctor at that hospital. Mm-hmm. Like you're still 3 to 4 more times as likely to die than someone else. And that's kind of ridiculous. Not kind of, it is. Mm-hmm. It is ridiculous. So, believe us when we say things, please, outside of begging, which we've done too. I don't know how else to make that clear,
Mm-hmm. How would you address, I guess, so a lot of people, when they think of midwives, they're like, oh, it's going to be some hippy dippy birthing thing. And I'm not into that.
I mean, like I said in the beginning too, we practice in the hospital. So sometimes it's really that hippy dippy. I know some midwives who practice very medically hands-on, like that's the path that they go down. So we meet you where you are. That's what I say about midwives. We meet you where you are. What do you want to do? This is about you. It's not about us. And I think many of us recognize that, like, this is about you, what your experience, how you want this to come across. You want to see just a doctor? I can find a way for that to happen. You want to get down and deliver a baby outside in the field? I'm down for that too. In the water, come on, let's go. Wherever you want to go, wherever you want to be, what makes you comfortable, as long as we're safe too. Mm-hmm. That's important. But they told us in school to prepare our elevator speech. If someone gets into the elevator and says, and it's happened before. So I'm so glad they made us do this in training. It's like you get into the elevator, somebody sees your badge, it says midwife on it. Oh, midwives, what's that? Or I've heard so many different things. They still have those, we never went away. Midwifery's been here long before the hospital system was introduced. This is how communities were thriving and surviving. But basically what I like to say is we are healthcare providers who offer care to low-risk individuals. And like I said before, the range of things, the scope of things that we can do, education, that's important too, policy change. We're working in so many different realms we can get down in a hippy dippy fashion if you'd like, but that's not necessarily the standard, so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember because I gave birth almost 7 months ago. So it was during this whole pandemic thing and to my first, and I birthed with the group of midwives that I work with. Mm-hmm. And for a while, when I was like 6 months pregnant, they're like, we're not letting partners in. And of course, that's like out of the midwife's control. Like it was the hospital policy. And I was telling the midwife, I'm like, if you guys don't let Vito in, I'm not going in there. I'm going to give birth in the garage. And she's like, I'll meet you in there. It's okay. Yeah. I'm like, okay, I guess I'm not going in. But thankfully they changed the policy. But I was like, no.
Yeah, no. And the thing is, too, birth is not meant to be done alone. We are mammals. Let's say that. So birth is not a production, which it tends to be in the hospital. It can be like you have like this whole roll of students. I was talking to a midwife friend, a colleague the other day, and she was saying how like there was like a call downstairs to the ER because someone's about to have a baby, and she flew down there and she looked behind her and it's like 30 people in the room. And I'm like, no, get everybody out. What are you here for? What are you here for? Did she ask you to be here? Are you part of her birth team? Because if not, you don't need to be here. But I think people too are astonished and amazed at natural birth. So it is a wonder, but you would need to be invited to the wonder, that magic. You need to be invited. So yeah, it's not meant to be done alone, but also not a huge production. We do best when we can go into ourselves during these times, so that we can really tap into like what is happening. Many people will describe it as like an out of body experience at some points during their birth, and you really need the support that you need. That's important for you during those times, not the background noise of other people saying things and getting into the mix. So there is a place for your support during this time, and you gotta pick and choose who you're letting into that that one-time experience. So
yeah, I originally wanted like a bunch of people in the room with me because I just always envisioned that, I guess. And due to COVID, it was just my husband and I, and then like our midwife and doula and the nurses, and we were like so thankful that it was just us, because I'm like, I felt my labor was like very long and hard. I was like just puking profusely for hours, and so I'm like, I'm so glad no one was in there, because I just would have felt watched. Like, I would have been like, what, are you just waiting for me to have this baby? Like, I'm waiting too. Like,
that's literally it. And there's another saying out there too: if you're not comfortable with someone, if you're not comfortable pooping in front of a person, don't have them there, because that's very real, you know. But that's like gives you perspective. So, you know, it's kind of like initially in early labor, you might find people like trying to cover up, and once you get into the thralls of labor, those clothes are off.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You're like, I don't care. I don't care what, but whoever's here it is, you know. And it's the truth there. But yeah, it's not a production, and you got to be invited to that party. That is how I feel about it. So I think, like you were saying too, so a friend of mine and I host we just did our first postpartum prep group. And so this is designed for Black birthers who are pregnant right now. And basically in preparing, we talk about who you want there, and then how those things might change in the moment, and then who you want around postpartum and how that might change. And it's interesting to see like the evolution of thought as like pregnancy progresses forward. And, as one of our participants actually had their baby, they were like, at first we were like, it's just going to be us. But then the mom got involved, and it's like, people you think you may not want around, that you actually might want a little close by. And then there are some folks that you're like, I just don't want that. And I think a lot of people are observing that and thankful for the close knit, experience when it comes to birth now. They're like, man, like, I wanted someone else here, but like, I'm so glad it's just us. Mm-hmm. And then we talk about the golden hour, which is like, the first hour after birth, or first few hours after birth, where you bond with your baby, which is critical. Like, it's critical. I need people to understand this is a critical time. Very important. And there's so many different things that can be disruptive during that time. But like right now, we're seeing these patients get to bond. Like, I'm seeing a lot more daddy kisses for the baby and for the mama, as opposed to like grandma stepping in, which again, it's all love. But like, that unit needs to have their moment, going during that time. So it's definitely brought a lot of perspective, the pandemic. Oof.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I know. After our birth, my husband was like, he apologized to his sisters, and he was like, I'm so sorry that we just came in here after you had a baby. He's like, I think I would never do that now. Like, I would never just go into somebody's room after they had a baby, like, and talk to them. He's like, and he was there like when they were in labor earlier, and he's like, I'm so sorry I wouldn't do that. And everybody's experience is different. Like, my next birth, I'm planning at a birth center, and then the last one, or whatever, if we have a third kid, like, I want it at home, and I want like everyone around me, like, so it'll be different. But the hospital rooms are so small. I'm like, if it's home, it's like somebody can be cooking and somebody can be doing like whatever, and it's different thing. You have different roles there, but when you're in a hospital, there's only so many roles that you can do. So, and then like everybody's experience is different. But yeah, I mean, the pandemic has definitely brought a lot of perspective and change to birthing people.
For sure. Absolutely.
So what would you say to people listening who maybe were hearing some of like the birthing crisis information for the first time, or just kind of like how some of those policies work and how they affect the BIPOC community and just women in our country? And they're like, how am I supposed to make a difference? Like, what is something that I can do to make sure that women aren't dying in our country giving birth? Right. Because you feel like, well, yeah, that's horrible. This shouldn't be happening, but what am I supposed to do about it?
Right. There are so many different avenues. And I think even for me, it's been kind of like again, you check yourself. We all can't do everything. We can do many things, or maybe we can do one thing really, really well, but there's so many different avenues to help, alleviate this situation. And depending on what perspective you're coming from, if we're talking about, BIPOC birthers, it's prepare yourself, know the data, know what the expectations are when you're going into the hospital space, know your rights. And there are a lot of different resources out there that kind of go over that. I love evidence-based birth. They go over quite a bit of information as to what your hospital rights are and expectations, induction based on age, all kinds of things. So there's that. Knowing what you're walking into, the space you're walking into, and also fortifying your support system. So it's been tricky during the pandemic, but it can be done. Doulas do work virtually, and now we're starting to see a little shift. So hopefully the doulas can start coming back if they weren't able to be privileged or couldn't come into the hospital before. But fortify your support system and assign people their role for you and say, this is what I'd like you to do. It's okay if that role changes during the experience, but assigning them something to do so that they can make sure that you're taken care of, to having someone with you, which has been, again, challenging during a pandemic, to hear what's being said. Because not only does pregnancy do a lot to the brain, but also in the moment, if you're given news that might be concerning, you might just be focused on that, and that's all you hear. Whereas someone else might be hearing more, and you can talk about things later and go back and forth and say, oh, is that what they said? So there's that aspect. And for Black birthers, I really want them to know you can have a successful Black birth in a hospital. I've seen it happen, and I've seen the tears of victory over it. So it is possible. Make noise until you're heard. And I hate to even have to say that, but sometimes that's what's necessary until someone listens to you. Keep talking until someone hears you. What can others do? There's so many different avenues. So I'd like everyone to take a look into the Momnibus Act, which is a set of, I think, 12 or 16 bills. Forgive me, again, tired brain, that look at research, policy change, access, diversifying healthcare, all kinds of different avenues and bills to kind of again, help with this issue of the crisis of Black maternal health. And so that's really important to tap into. So policy and knowing what's going on, legislation wise, because we got to make change at the top too, which I guess government could be considered the top in some aspects, but, we got to make change at the top. Donating to Black birth centers. There's a birth center equity fund that is trying to get more Black or BIPOC birth centers across the nation. Right now, I think there's only 12 Black-owned birth centers across the United States. Birth centers are kind of few and far between depending on where you go anyway, but to know that there's only 12. Again, like I said, Stephanie Mitchell is working on another one, so she'll hopefully be number 13, I think, here. I don't really care where I am on the numbers list. I just want to get on there. It's coming. When I tell you I drew that thing out 2007, 2009, somewhere between there, it's there. It's going to happen. But, donating to those, if you have the funds and that's something you want to do, or donating to a midwife so that they can actually bring someone in, maybe cost-free, who couldn't afford this service otherwise. There are scholarships out there. Nikki McGyver of San Antonio Nurse Midwifery, she does a scholarship fund for her clients as well. Look for the Black midwives, man. Send us your coins, because what we're doing is really trying to save our community. there's that, becoming an ally and recognizing what that means, which is sometimes in allyship. I have a friend who hosts, I'm like name dropping right now, but I have a friend, her name's Jennifer Harrison Hudson. She's actually a Black physical therapist, and she has a program called Building Allyship, and this stemmed all last year after George Floyd. And so in her community of physical therapists and wellness and movement providers, yoga, Pilates, all that stuff, they're wanting to kind of shake up their own world, and anyone can join it, but kind of doing your own research, not relying on Black people to tell you or BIPOC people to tell you about the history. We've done that for a long time. It's tiresome, again, it's that like repeating ourselves over and over and no one's really listening. So, and then once you learn, start sharing. It's important for you to share that information. So that you can let other people know, like, hey, that doesn't really sound right. This is not really appropriate. And this is the historical context as to why. So sharing that information, and sometimes it's better, I see a lot of that on social media. Sometimes it's better received from your own people. Just like we find, like, sometimes care from Black providers, some Black providers for Black people is better received by the patient than from others. Not to say that there aren't others doing the work. For clients themselves to, you had mentioned like vetting your provider to ask the hard questions, so there's a health crisis. What are you doing about it? What are you doing? What can I expect from you in my care that's going to be different? And let me know that you really are paying attention to me. Those are crucial questions. So, and then research wise too, there, like I said, so many different avenues. If you're interested in research, and again, what the historical part of it is we had been tested on without our permission, and that leads to mistrust and a distrust in the system again. So not necessarily controlling what's happening, but like if you have the information, offering guidance, but also knowing when to speak up and when to be quiet is important too. So those are a few things. One thing that I'm super passionate about too is within communities, storytelling, because that's a way of healing. And again, because we've not been listened to, and this goes across the board for anyone who's had a baby. I feel like birth stories, we really don't get into it too much. And so when someone starts sharing it, you get a group of birthers together, the stories will just kind of continue. And then like the correlation, and then also, the differences show up, but people want to pour out because it truly is transformative. And then sometimes it's traumatic, sometimes it's healing. So, so for me, storytelling is definitely a method of healing, and also kind of breaking down that toxic secrecy, especially that we have in the Black community, which is like, we don't talk about this. And then you find out like your mother had 2 miscarriages because you had a miscarriage, but they didn't talk about it before. So like discussing these things as you're able to, as a way to help heal, and then, help learn what the process is, what you can expect. So there's so many, I know I listed a lot, but there's so many different things that we can do to kind of help tackle all that's going on in our nation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing all of that. I'll list some of the resources in the show notes as well. And you guys can go follow her at the Vagina Chronicles. She's so much fun to follow, and also learn more there. Is there anywhere else where people listening can connect with you?
Sure. Also on my website, under construction, but it's there. I'm transitioning from blog work to newsletter. So it's kind of like we're in a little construction phase, but it is the vaginachronicles.org. So you can find me there. And then look out for me soon. I will be out there. This birth center is happening. I'm calling it into existence. That's the secrecy too. I've kept it quiet for a little while, but it's time to start talking about it so that it can manifest the way that it needs to. Mm-hmm. So yeah. So
right. And you never know, like Somebody could be like, oh, wait, you're wanting to start one? I've been wanting to fund one.
Yeah.
And you're like, what?
Email, if that's you.
Right.
Email. Yes. So you can find me there. If you are interested in, preparing for postpartum, we are launching our second postpartum group. The first one was absolutely amazing. It is just like, we ended not last week, the week before. And so we were doing 6 weeks Sunday. It's a 6-week program. So the following Sunday, it was just so weird not to meet with them. And one of our participants emailed us and they're like, is anyone else feeling like a little weird that we don't have time together today? And I was like, no, it's not just you. So you build up this community again, especially during this time where you cannot necessarily get out the same way. We're starting to slowly move out, but it brings a level of community and connection. And and then also preparation for what is to come. So, so that's something people can look out for on social media and on my website. We'll be launching another one soon. So
awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much again for taking the time after your long shift and not sleeping and sharing with us. And thank you so much for coming on here.
Thanks for having me.
Right. I hope you guys got as much out of that episode as I did. I feel like these are such important conversations to have to bring that awareness to what birthing people are experiencing and the systemic racism in the birthing community, because it very much is there. And as a doula, I've seen it, I hear about it. And I feel like me and a lot of my colleagues were trying to continually educate ourselves to see where can we make a difference? Where do we fit into this equation of being part of the change? And the biggest thing is listening and amplifying voices in the communities that are underrepresented and aren't being heard and are experiencing these crazy statistics. So, again, I just love conversations like this, and I'm excited to have more. I'm excited to dive more into it and to just learn with you guys how we can make a difference in the motherhood community, in supporting each other. In I think so much of it goes back to being heard, being validated and heard. I don't know if you guys remember back in the end of February, we did an episode, and she was explaining her birth story and everything that happened to her and her struggles with infertility and her experience with the doctors and how she wasn't listened to and she wasn't heard. And basically it went to the point where she kind of had to get in somebody's face and be like, you have to see me right now. It was with Danny Kilgore. Yeah. Or at the end of January with Danny Kilgore. And then she was they were looking at her like, oh, you're just an angry Black woman, but she wasn't being heard and she wasn't being validated. And once they actually saw her and listened to her, they found there was a problem. She had to get loud in order to be heard. And that's just not right. You need to listen. We need to listen to each other, and respect each other and respect each other's intuition. If I feel like something's going on in my body, listen to that. And there's just so much more that we need to work on in the birthing community. So I'm excited to continue to learn. I feel like the last couple of years, I've been diving a lot more into the doula stuff and just becoming more and more passionate about it, and really passionate about sharing your rights in labor and delivery. So I'm going to be sharing more of that stuff on my personal Instagram. Right now, I'm doing a series on Wednesdays for Hump Day for trying to conceive, and I'm bringing on different experts to share tips about what you can do, how to prepare yourself if you want to try to conceive soon. And so every Wednesday, we're just doing short videos on that. They're like 10 to 15 minute long videos. So you guys can join me there. And I'm going to be sharing a lot more about birth plans and your rights and options and things that you can do to make sure that you are being listened to, that you have providers that support you, and and wanting to really get in on the change from the ground up, because having a provider that listens to you might not be your fault. Like, you could do everything that you can, but your insurance only covers certain people, and you can't afford to have a birth out of pocket because birthing is freaking expensive. So even setting up funds so that birthing people can have the people that they want, they can have the providers that they want. It's kind of what we talked about in this episode too, like being able to pay midwives for the work that they are doing. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this episode. Next week, we are having Meg Boggs back on. I'm super excited to talk to her. So I don't know if you guys remember, but 2 years ago, when I first started the Miraculous Mamas podcast, we had Meg Boggs on. She was like one of the first guests, and we just had such a great conversation. Well, she just came out with a book. She's just killing it in the game. I love following her because she's so powerful. She's so strong. I watch like her workout videos and I'm like, oh my gosh, this woman is so strong. I feel like I'm so weak. But we're going to talk about body image and strength and everything that she's really passionate about. So if you're not following her, check out her Instagram and join us for the interview next week. Make sure that you're following us on Instagram or join our Miraculous Mamas Facebook group. You can follow the Twitter account, although I have to be honest, I never do anything with it. I always forget that it's even there. One day I'm hoping to be able to pay someone to run the social media for me, because it's just not my strong suit and it is really time consuming. And I feel like I have 5 jobs right now. So one day we'll be able to have a Miraculous Mamas social media manager, and you guys can follow along on the Twitter and stay updated with everything there. And make sure that if you're listening to the episode, if you've reached out and you've said, I love the podcast, I love what you're doing with it, make sure that you leave a review. That's how we get out there more, is by leaving reviews, so that it kind of brings it back into the algorithm for people to view it, and then share it. Share this podcast with people that you know who would benefit from it. You can share specific episodes or just the podcast in general. Also, let me know who you want to hear from. I want to know what you guys want to learn about. I want to know who you want to have on. If there's somebody that you're like, you should have this person on your podcast, DM that person, tell them to come on my podcast, DM me at that person, say, hey, go on the Miraculous Mamas podcast, and then share it with me as well. So they'll be like, wait, the Miraculous Mamas podcast? And I'll be like, yeah, what's up? Come on. So we can work together trying to get great guests on. Anyways, I hope you guys are enjoying April. They say April showers brings May flowers. We did have rain last week. Not so much this week, but we will see. I'm really excited for the weather to continue to get a little bit warmer. I can tell you this is the time of year that I really, really struggle, and I get seasonal depression in like April and May. Ever since I moved to Chicago, because the weather's just like meh. And I think just after the pandemic and being inside and having a baby and my world changing, I'm just kind of meh right now, just feeling kind of in a funk. So I'm excited for it to get a little bit warmer. I just want to feel the sun on my skin and just feel the warmth of that. That sounds so glorious right now. So hopefully it'll warm up here soon. Anyways, I love you guys. Again, join me at eSandos on Instagram, where I'm going to be sharing a lot more trying to conceive tips, things for your birthing plan, and just a lot more doula stuff. Also, last thing before we go, if there's a podcast that you want me to go on, at me at their podcast and message them. Say, hey, bring Liz on. She's awesome and going to talk about doula stuff. I've recently gone on a couple of podcasts and I had such a good time. The Whiskey and Lemon podcast, we dive into some of my travels and then rights in labor and delivery, and then also the Mommin podcast. That was a really great episode. If you guys want to check that out, I dove pretty deep into your rights in healthcare, why it's important, and birth plans and providers and advocating for yourself. So if you want to listen a little bit more about that stuff, go Go check it out. All right. I love you guys. I hope that you're having a great month. Be kind, spread love, and I look forward to just building in community with you. All right. Bye.
If you want to be the most interesting person at the cocktail party, well, hop on over and listen to the Brain Candy podcast.
Our award-winning content will have you laughing while you're learning.
We read all the best articles, books, and studies, and keep up with new TV shows, documentaries, and pop culture. And then we cram it all into 2 shows a week.
Conspiracy theories, cannibal rabbits, unsolved mysteries, the history of the Walkman. There's something for everyone.
The Brain Candy podcast. Find our link in the show notes.
Or simply search for the Brain Candy podcast on your podcast app.